The Rain Dragon Rescue, Chapter 2, Toaster Trouble. Breakfast with Grandpa Abe is so much better than breakfast back home, Ben thought as he settled into a wobbly kitchen chair. There were no vitamins, no whole grain muffins, no fresh squeezed wheatgrass juice. Sugar was the main ingredient. This morning's meal featured a box of rainbow-colored sugar loops, a couple of glazed donuts, and white bread with strawberry jam. There was just one problem. "Where's the toaster?" Grandpa Abe asked, pointing at the counter. A rectangle of left-behind crumbs filled the space where the toaster usually sat. "I don't know," Ben said with a shrug. There was absolutely no way he could tell his grandfather the truth. A real dragon was difficult enough to explain, but why one would want a toaster, well, Ben was still trying to wrap his brain around that question. "Did you put it in a drawer?" Grandpa Abe rubbed his bald head. "Why would I put my toaster in a drawer?" "Did you take it to the senior center?" It seemed a reasonable question, since his grandfather spent most days at the Buttonville Senior Center. On Mondays, the seniors played bingo. Tuesdays, they played board games. And Wednesdays, they took dance lessons. On Thursdays, they listened to lectures. Fridays were for celebrating birthdays. And Saturdays were dedicated to eating pudding. Ben figured that in between all those activities, they might eat toast. "I didn't take the toaster anywhere. Oy vey, what a mystery," Grandpa Abe sighed. "I need a lost toaster like I need a hole in my head." He poured coffee into a chipped mug, then joined Ben at the table. "I'll help you look for it," Ben offered. Before sticking him on a plane to Buttonville, Ben's parents had given him a small wad of cash, enough for emergencies. He could buy a new toaster at the Buttonville hardware store, and his grandfather would never know. "I'm good at finding things." Grandpa Abe's face got all crinkly as he smiled. "Okay by me, but eat your breakfast first." As his grandfather sipped his coffee, Ben opened the top of Snooze's hamster cage and dropped in a yellow sugar loop. He'd set the cage next to his cereal bowl. This would have caused a fuss back home, because Ben's mother was convinced that rodents, whether they were the small hamster variety or the large rat variety, carried ghastly germs. "Wash your hands," she always said after Ben held Snooze. "Don't kiss it or let it get near your food. Those creatures aren't clean." But Grandpa Abe didn't say a word about germs, and he didn't seem to care if things were clean or not. In fact, the entire kitchen was a mess. The floor was sticky, thanks to spilled coffee and syrup. The stove was covered in splattered grease, and even though Ben had tried to help clean the dishes, the stack in the sink still looked like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Maybe the mess was why Grandpa Abe hadn't noticed the claw marks on the counter or the singed hole in the tablecloth. Snooze poked his head out of his chewed toilet paper tube and grabbed the piece of cereal. Squatting on his round haunches with his nose wiggling, he sank his little teeth into the yellow loop and munched. "So, boy chick," Grandpa Abe said as he added sugar to his coffee, "what are your plans on such a nice day? Are you going to play with Pearl?" Ben didn't point out that playing was something little kids did. He was 10 years old, and if he decided to call Pearl, they'd hang out. Pearl Petal was his only friend in the little town of Buttonville. They'd met each other thanks to a great adventure involving an injured dragon hatchling and an escaped Sasquatch. Yep, that's right. After coming to Buttonville to stay with his grandfather for the summer, Ben Silverstein discovered that dragon hatchlings and Sasquatches really, truly exist, as do leprechauns and lake monsters. And he discovered all this thanks to Dr. Emerald Wu, a veterinarian who'd set up her hospital in the old Button factory. The sign on the hospital gate read, "Dr. Wu's Worm Hospital," but that was meant to mislead. Dr. Wu didn't take care of worms. She was a veterinarian for imaginary creatures, and everything that went on inside her hospital was a secret. Because Ben and Pearl had brilliantly caught the escaped Sasquatch, they were offered summer jobs as apprentices. And so, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Ben and Pearl worked from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., doing all sorts of things that were only supposed to happen in storybooks. But because they'd each signed a contract of secrecy, they had to zip their lips. That was why Ben couldn't tell his grandfather about last night's intruder. Today was Tuesday, Ben's day off, so other than buying his grandfather a new toaster and telling Pearl about the dragon sighting, he had no idea what he was going to do. Back home in Los Angeles, he might have invited friends over to swim in his pool. He might have played on his computer or watched television. But since Grandpa Abe didn't have a pool, or a computer, or a television, Ben was befuddled. Grandpa Abe cleared his throat. "You going to sit there all day, or are you going to answer my question? What are your plans?" Ben fidgeted. If he didn't come up with a plan, his grandfather would make him go to the senior center to play old board games like Scrabble and Monopoly. I think I should stay here and take care of Snooze because... Ben tried to think of a reason. Because he doesn't like to be left alone. He had a nightmare last night and he couldn't go back to sleep. I'm guessing he dreamed your cat was trying to eat him. Right on cue, Barnaby leaped through the kitchen window, then lay on the counter, a small black object clutched in his paws. Normally, Barnaby would bring home a dead rodent of some sort, but this object was flat and shiny. The cat looked right at Ben with a satisfied smile. He'd found a dragon scale. "Did you say your mouse had a nightmare?" Grandpa Abe asked, his gray eyebrows rising to the top of his forehead. "How do you know this?" "He's not a mouse, he's a hamster," Ben corrected, his gaze darting between Grandpa Abe and the cat. "And I can tell it was a nightmare because he was sleep running. That's like sleepwalking, except faster. This morning he's practically a nervous wreck. He needs me to take care of him." Snooze didn't look like a nervous wreck. He seemed content chewing his loop. "Sleep running?" Grandpa Abe folded his arms and stared over the top of the cereal box. "Benjamin Silverstein, is that one of your stories?" Ben nodded sheepishly. He'd made up the story because he didn't want to hurt his grandfather's feelings about not wanting to go to the senior center. Grandpa Abe chuckled. "My grandson, the storyteller." With a groan, he rose from the chair and headed for the coffee maker. Then he stopped in front of the cat. "What's that thing Barnaby's chewing on?" But before Ben could come up with another story, a loud voice hollered, "Attention, Buttonville residents! Attention, Buttonville residents! Emergency meeting at Town Hall! Emergency meeting at Town Hall!" "Oi, Gavolt," Grandpa Abe exclaimed. "First the toaster, now this. Can't a man drink his coffee in peace?"